Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Daily Fulham Podcast, brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only place to bring you daily content on every Premier League side as well as women's football. My name is Gavin Ruffle, and today is Monday, and it's a very happy Monday for all you Fulham fans following that victory over Spurs by 2-0 on Sunday. And being a Monday, I'm here to recap all of the key events, to relive it all, discuss the major talking points. So we'll start from the very beginning. Obviously, Fulham coming into this game looking to make amends from last week's setback, that disappointing late goal going in at Brighton. So what would they do with their team to try and get the 3 points? Well, we saw one change, and it was the change I was pleading for, not necessarily to see Diop go out of the team, but just to see them revert back to that back four, something they just look more suited to, something they're familiar with. They're familiar with that system, playing it over and over again for several seasons now. When they've tinkered, when they've gone to the back five, it hasn't quite looked right at times. Certain personnel have looked less comfortable, so I was happy from the start to see them go to a four at the back. One slight surprise was Willian playing from the start. This was his first start since his return to Fulham. I was probably expecting Adama Traore to get the nod. Did miss the last game with an injury, so we did see him back in the squad. He was on the bench. As for Spurs, I was anticipating multiple changes following their European exploits, and multiple changes is indeed what we got. The big hitters, the likes of Son and Maddison, were on the bench, as well as their goal scorer, Audebert. Maybe the league's not so much of a priority now for Ange. All his eggs are in that Europa League basket, which is why we saw a lot of changes. It was still a decent side, though, a lot of experience, a lot of Premier League appearances from the 11 players in their side. And we saw Fulham with Willian in the team. The setup was very similar to what we saw last season now, with Iwobi playing over on the right, Willian playing on the left, with Robinson playing in that favoured left-back position as opposed to the left wing-back. I felt it was important for Fulham to try and make a fast start in this game, given Spurs' European outing on Thursday, so less recovery time for them. We know performances at Craven Cottage have sometimes been a bit flat recently, so you just want to see them take it to Spurs right from the kickoff. Also a milestone game for Marco Silva. This was his 200th Premier League game in charge. That covers spells at Hull, Watford, Everton, and his most successful one now at Fulham. I do feel also Fulham are less fearful going into games now against Spurs since Harry Kane's departure. He was a real thorn in their side. He was a thorn in the side of a lot of Premier League teams, wasn't he? But since then, I think there's more of an even playing field between the two sides now, when we know Spurs, the trials and tribulations they're having this season, they're not where they want to be, so they certainly didn't hold any fear for Fulham coming into it. So yeah, as I said, I wanted them to make a fast start. It was a bit of an opening in the first 4 or 5 minutes for Fulham. Spurs are high up, there's a misplaced pass, Fulham break through Raul Jimenez, who slides it out wide to Andres Pereira. He unleashes not quite a shot, not quite a cross, and it sails past Vicario's far post, but there's an early warning sign for Spurs. I talked about that fast start, but apart from that cross-come shot from Pereira, it wasn't the fast start you would have been hoping for. It was kind of in keeping with some of the recent games at Craven Cottage, and similar sort of half an hour to the game we saw against Brighton last week before that opened up. First real threat from Spurs came through Tell, who was playing on the left-hand side. He skips by a couple of Fulham defenders, drives a low cross into the box, but there's no Spurs man following in at the back post. There were claims for a Fulham penalty. Fulham worked the ball out to Iwobi, who's right of central. He clips a ball into Raul Jimenez. Jimenez goes down after a push in the back from Spence. It's not deemed forceful enough for a pen, and it was quite a theatrical fall from Jimenez, so I think it was the right decision there. But there was some frustration from Marco Silva with the referee, as we've seen time and time again. I think it was just the inconsistency, because I think there was a foul on Willian by Romero just outside the box, but nothing was given. A few minutes later, where there was a foul committed by Calvin Bassey, which is a similar sort of offence. So it's just that sort of inconsistency that upsets managers, doesn't it? And we were seeing that on show yet again. The biggest chance in the half falls for Timothy Castagna. Once again, it comes from an Iwobi cross into the box with the outside of his right foot. Bit of an aimless ball, to be honest. It looks like Vicario's just going to collect it, but Davies, he gets a foot to it, can't quite clear his lines, and only guides it into the path of Castagna. It falls to him on his left foot, and it's a really weak effort straight at Vicario. Wrong man, right place. So it was a quietish first half hour, as I said, but Fulham was suddenly starting to find their flow and ask a few more questions of the Spurs back line. Willian was becoming more of a danger as the half progressed. The corners were starting to pile up as well, but could they make the most of them? It was noticeable how towards the end of the half, Ange did make a tactical change. He just changed the fullbacks over. We know Jed Spence has mainly operated at left back this season. Well, he started the game at right back, but he just switched it later on. So Udogie went to right back and Spence went over to the left side. So for the first 25-30 minutes, I would say it was pretty poor quality. Both sides were guilty of giving the ball away quite sloppily, quite needlessly. And then Fulham did start to control the possession from that point on. But not the greatest the first halves, to be honest. Spurs offered very little. But they did have options off the bench. They had Son, they had Maddison, they had the goal scorer for midweek, Odegaard, that could potentially come on and change the game. As for Fulham going into half-time, the last 15 minutes of the half were bright. You were just hoping they would be able to continue where they left off, pile a bit more pressure on. And then hopefully the demands of midweek would pay off and Fulham can get the result they're looking for. And I'll come on to the second half action shortly. But before I do that, let me just point you in the direction of our sponsors. Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. Well, Ange Postecoglou clearly wasn't happy about the first half display from Spurs as he made substitutions immediately. Son and Bergvall both coming on for Bissouma and Johnson. We know Brennan Johnson scored the goal in the game earlier in the season, but he was ineffective really. Anthony Robinson was pushing him back in that first half, so we didn't see much from Brennan Johnson as far as an attacking threat goes. Those changes did seem to have the galvanising effect that Ange and Spurs fans would have been hoping for. Forced a couple of corners early on. Passing was a bit more crisp and slicker, and the first real meaningful attempt on goal comes from a Dom Solanke header which goes wide after initial good play from Bergvall. He stands the ball up to the back stick, but Solanke can't quite get good enough contact to at least test Bernd Leno. But there's just more of a purpose now to Spurs. There's more of an initiative about them after the change. Things are happening quicker. I felt at times with Jimenez, although he was trying in this game, his work rate was there. I just felt at times with Fulham attacks, whenever he received the ball, he was slowing it down a little bit. He was drifting out wide at times, frustrated he's not getting so many chances in the box. As the game was progressing, if they looked like there was going to be a winner, it looked like it was Spurs. The good play from Fulham in the last 15 minutes of the first half, we weren't seeing that carry on into the second half. So Marco Silva looked to his bench to make changes. So we saw Adama come on for Iwobi. Iwobi was really good in the game against Brighton, standout player I felt. But this was an ineffective afternoon for him, and the straight swap of Rodrigo Muniz coming on for Raul Jimenez. We know Muniz is always a threat when he comes off the bench. Has often popped up with goals. To counter that, Ange made subs of his own. We saw Maddison come on for Romero, very attacking change there, which meant that Archie Gray went to centre-back, a position he's become familiar with this season. Some chances for Spurs. Tell's out on the right. He cuts inside. Tries to bend one in the far post with his left foot. It's a comfortable save for Leno. However, he's not able to quite clear it and comes out to James Maddison. Really good first touch. Lays it off in a path for Solanke, but he lacks a bit of composure and fires over from very close range. We see Tom Kearney come on for the last 20 minutes. He replaced Emile Smith-Rowe. Tom Kearney, if you remember back to the game at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, it's a bit of a mixed bag for him. Scoring the goal and then getting sent off. But once again, Emile Smith-Rowe didn't make an impact on the game, did he? Soon after that change, Fulham almost go into a lead through Willian. He's inches away from putting Fulham a goal ahead. It comes from Pereira, who's out on the right. He crosses it in. There's no real Fulham players attacking the ball. So Vicario comes out like Superman, can only punch it to Willian. He's got a little bit of time. He's about 20 yards out. He tries to curl one into the far corner. Vicario, he's sprawling. He's beaten, but it's just past the post. Head in hand to Willian, he knows how close it was. However, not long after that, Fulham find the goal they've been looking for, and it comes from one of those substitutes. It's initial good work from Robinson to dispossess. I can't remember if it was Spence or Tell, but he dispossesses one of those. Gets a cross in, not cleared, comes to Adama Traore. He lays it off to Pereira, who slips it to his left for Rodrigo Muniz, and he hits a first-time shot. It's a bit of a P-roller, to be honest. It seems to take an age to get to the goal, but it's measured to perfection from Muniz. He beats Vicario, who's at full stretch, but it goes into his bottom right corner. So the big question now is, with that goal lead, can Fulham hold on to it? We know clean sheets have been hard to come by, especially at home. Can they just calm the nerves, control the game for the last 10-15 minutes, and get a much needed win? Soon after the goal, there are claims for a penalty, this time for Spurs, for a foul on Bergvall. Bergvall's running into the box. He slips the ball to the side of Bassi, chases his own pass, gets in front of Bassey. There is contact on the player, but I feel like it is partly initiated by the Spurs man, so I don't think it is a foul, and neither does the referee. No penalty given. Willian comes off to a standing ovation. Didn't quite get the goal he was looking for, but still showed in moments he still has that silky touch and just football intelligence, and he's shown Marco Silva that he can offer a little bit more than just the 15-20 minute cameo off the bench. Coming on to replacing is Ryan Sessegnon, coming up against his former club, of course, who let him go in the summer, and he makes the most immediate of impacts, almost written in the stars. Leno has the ball at his feet, just hoofs it long, diagonal, right to left. Ryan Sessegnon runs off Jed Spence. Jed Spence isn't alert to him, he doesn't track his run, and then he's fighting there, he's competing with ken.Davies, and he just outmuscles him, he outstrengths him, outwits him, comes to him on his right foot, and he just bends when past Vicario into the right corner of the net. No chance for the goalkeeper. It's a super finish from Sessegnon on his weaker foot. And any nerves there might be about the last 5 minutes, Fulham hanging on to a lead, well, they're alleviated, because at 2-0, that is truly game, set and match. And once again, Fulham subs come on to make the difference in the game. There is a late chance for Spurs to get a goal. Low strike in the box from Dom Solanke, but Leno saves comfortably to preserve his clean sheet. And that's full time. 2-0, up to 8th. Europe is still on. And in the final part, I will give my final thoughts on the outing and what this does for Fulham's European chances.
Your body is unique. And Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bionique, the world's most personalised supplements. Bionique provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bionique. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now.
Once again, Fulham have responded to defeat in the best possible way by winning the next game. The last 4 times they've suffered defeat, they've followed up with and winning the next game, and that's a testament to the character of the players, because no doubt the defeat at Brighton would have hurt given the circumstances, given the fact that they are a rival for Europe. But you've got to pick yourselves up after that, and Fulham have done just that. It looked like it was a game that might not have gone their way in the second half, but they showed the character and fortitude to grab 2 late goals to get the 3 points. Was it a deserved win? I think it was, just about. You look at the stats, there probably wasn't much in it in terms of attempts on goal, in terms of XG, but I think it just came down to, at the end of the day, that Fulham may be wanting it a bit more. Spurs, their ambition, their priorities for the rest of the season, they are with the Europa League, and we saw that with the changes that Ange made, which signalled his intent. He subsequently received criticism for his team selection against Fulham. A lot of people suggesting that he should have just kept the same team that won in Europe, given the fact that they don't play another game for 17 or 18 days. So I think it was just the fact that there was more riding on the game for Fulham. They wanted it just a little bit more, which is why they came up with the 3 points. And it shows the importance of having subs that can come off the bench and make an impact. And we've seen that again for Fulham. We've seen that so many times this season, haven't we? That's 13 goals now that Fulham substitutes have contributed. And a large number of those goals would have resulted in Fulham wins, and Rodrigo Muniz would have been the heart of that. He would have scored quite a good number of goals from the bench. As I said before, he doesn't want to earn that reputation of being a super sub, because it means you're not starting games. But when he came on, he had the impact that Marco Silva would have wanted. Raul Jimenez was a bit frustrated at times, maybe wasn't getting the service, didn't have any clear-cut opportunities. But you know, with Rodrigo Muniz, he's a havoc, he's a nuisance for defenders to deal with, and he took his goal extremely well, didn't he? And Ryan Sessegnon as well. I mean, what a sweet moment that would have been for Ryan Sessegnon. Obviously coming through as a youngster at Fulham and then getting his move to Spurs, and it just didn't quite work out for him, did it? I just felt maybe at times during the Spurs career he lacked a bit of belief in himself. You lose confidence with so many injuries, and Spurs fans certainly didn't see the best of him. So seeing him come on and within seconds scoring the second goal, which clinched the game, was a great moment. It was quite funny as well to see the meltdown from Spurs fans once that goal went in online on social media. Yeah, it was quite amusing. I did have a little chuckle to myself, but yeah, it was potentially a game that could have gone the other way. We've seen so many times with Fulham this season, home games against bottom half clubs, and I was preparing to put out that Mick McCarthy meme/gif on social media. It can't go on like this, can it? It can. Thankfully, Fulham got those late goals. which meant they got the 3 points in a game where they probably were expected to win coming into this game. Probably a good time to play Spurs, and if they wanted to keep pace with some of the other sides around them. I think as well with Fulham games, late goals are a theme in a lot of the games. I think with Spurs as well, they're two teams in the Premier League. There's a lot of late goals in the last 15 minutes, which just again emphasises the fact that how substitutes can come off the bench and make a difference. And they fight to the bitter end, don't they? I also think one of the subs that didn't come on to score, Adama Traore, made an impact, not necessarily in his play, because it almost looked like watching him, he was playing with steel boots because his first touch got so far in front of him. But I just feel the effect it had on Spurs then, because a doggy was bombing on in that second half. But then all of a sudden, Traore coming off the bench with his blistering pace, it just asked another question. It forced the doggy to go back, because if he commits himself too far forward, then he just leaves himself exposed with Adama's electric pace. So although Adama, he looked a little bit rusty. I mean, which is weird because he's only missed one game, but his touch was all over the place. So he did have an impact, a subtle sort of impact. I think you also got to give credit to Andreas Pereira, the much maligned Andreas Pereira. He's been criticised from pillar to post, hasn't he, for the last year or so, it seems like. But I thought he was superb. I certainly feel like he was one of Fulham's best attacking players. A lot of energy, closing down well, trying to create, and you can't underestimate the role he plays in the first goal as well, can you? Just to have the wherewithal about him to just calmly slide the ball across for Muniz to slot in. I think another player that's received a bit of criticism recently, probably fairly, he's been a little bit up and down, inconsistent performances, is Joachim Andersen, but I thought this was a much better display for him, confidently striding out of defence, utilising that long diagonal which we used to see, and the defensive work he had to do. I felt he did well with Calvin Bassey, who continues to be that consistent defender that they have. And Fulham have struggled to keep clean sheets at home as well, haven't they? And so Bernd Leno didn't have much to do, really. I think I can remember a couple of saves, one from Tal and one from Solanke. I think his kicking wasn't great, but the work he had to do with his hands, he did pretty well, and his Fulham defence in front of him did well to limit the clear-cut chances for Spurs. As for Spurs, while pressure continues to mount on Ange, and that's 15 defeats in 29 league games, which is quite incredible, isn't it? Because you expect them to be challenging towards the top end of the table, maybe not competing for titles, but certainly being in the European chase, looking at those Champions League places. So the fact that they've lost more than half of their games is staggering, really, and you can understand why the pressure's starting to mount on him, or continuing to mount on him. Despite the result in Europe in midweek, I don't think anything's going to happen now until the end of the season. They have got that lifeline, which is the Europa League, so they can potentially qualify for the Champions League, and the team he selected indicates that is his priority. As much as he might come out and say the league is still as much of a priority as Europa League is, subconsciously I think he knows it's all about the Europa League this season, which can turn a disastrous season into a good season, and bringing that silverware to Spurs, which has been a long time coming. But it's certainly a tough time for him. I think you saw that as well. I think there was an incident after the game. It was either at half time or after the game where he was having a bit of an argument with one or two fans, which further highlights the pressure he's under, because you shouldn't be responding to a bit of fan criticism at the ground like that, in my personal opinion. Just throwing things back to Fulham, they're back in the mix again now, heading into the international break. Long break between the next Premier League game. Of course, the FA Cup is the next game on the horizon, and they're back in the hunt for Europe. Where are all those people, by the way, who said that the season was over after the Brighton defeat? I mean, they're 3 points off Manchester City and 3 points off qualifying for the Champions League. I also think it was an important win because it looks like there's some traffic coming from behind them. So Brentford got a positive result, didn't they, against Bournemouth? So they're not even secure of finishing in the top half, so it just shows how close it is in that sort of area in the table at the minute. No teams pulling away from each other. The top three look clear, but after that there's a whole bunch of clubs, and yeah, if Fulham didn't get a positive result, then they might be looking at over their shoulder at Crystal Palace and Brentford and not even finishing in the top half. And now they've got the dream. The European dream is alive. The Champions League dream is alive. They're still in the mix, aren't they? How do I see it going? I think probably Champions League is just going to be too much for them, to be honest, even if it does go down to 5. They've got some tough games coming up now against Arsenal and Liverpool, so that'll be a real test for them. But then again, they've shown in those games against the teams higher up in the league that they can hold their own, and they've often been a lot better in those games. In the fixtures that you don't expect them to do so well in, certainly you go into those games and you attack them with positivity now, coming off a win rather than back-to-back defeats. But I think in the terms of the Champions League race, I'll give a prediction. I think Nottingham Forest, they look like they've turned the corner now. Because I did worry for them a few weeks ago after their back-to-back defeats. But I think they've taken 7 points out of the last 3 games now. Big win for them against Man City, followed up with a win against Ipswich. I think they'll be absolutely fine now, which will just cap off an incredible season for them to hold on to their Champions League spot. I think Manchester City will get there. Form for them has been inconsistent. Not how they would like it to be. But I just think they'll have enough. In the end, the team I'd be concerned for is Chelsea. Lost again on the weekend. You know, they've been fortunate in a couple of home games recently, playing against Southampton and Leicester, which have been just gimme 3 points basically the way those two teams are playing. But I'd be concerned for them. They're the team I think actually might slip out. I think Newcastle will finish in the top 5. So I don't think it's quite going to be Champions League football for Fulham next season, as much as that would be amazing. But you never stop dreaming, and until you're mathematically out of it, then why not think there's a possibility? There is certainly a possibility of Europe, whether that's Europa League or Europa Conference League. And what we do know after the results of the weekend is they will be playing Premier League football next season. Leicester and Ipswich, they cannot catch them. So, yeah, Fulham safe with 9 games to go, which is amazing, isn't it? The fact that they are safe with 9 games to go and mathematically can still win the league. So it shows they're heading in the right direction, doesn't it? So, yeah, we head into the end of March, April time now. Not long left in terms of the football season, but still a lot to play for. Still involved in the FA Cup and still involved in that hunt for Europe. So a lot to look forward to, a lot to get excited about. That'll draw things to a close for this recap of the Spurs game. A little break now with the international break, so the podcast will take a brief hiatus, but I will soon be back. Looking forward to Fulham's FA Cup tie against Crystal Palace, so do join me for that. All that's left for me to say is thank you all once again for listening. I've been Gavin Ruffle, your host as always, and do join me next time on the Daily Fulham podcast.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.